Kupo Moogles, TheShwantz27 here to recap the first week of our latest event for the Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide Randomizer community called Battlegrounds. All of the information about the event is in the description down below in case you want to read it all to yourself, but TLDR, it's a virtual game of Risk where the community is divvied up into two teams, the Returners and the Empire, and they compete to control territory and eventually the enemy base within the game world of Final Fantasy VI, with each spot on the map having a different flag set associated with it. Here's what the map looks like at the start of the event, with the Returners having control of 3 territories, the base Narshe, Figaro, and Sable Mountains, with the Empire also having control of 3 territories, the base Vector as well as the west and east southern continent. The other 8 spots are contested, so let's see which factions took which areas of the map. In week 1, we had the options of Thamasa, the Veld, and Dragon's Neck. The Thamasa flag set included a standard 6-character 9 Esper Kefka unlock with a skip at 12 Espers, as well as a +10 magic power stat to start, and killing a randomly selected dragon would result in learning all 24 lores. We had a 3-character start with 80% to 125% for stats and 5 stacks of GP, all the normal options for this category. Commands were random unique but no possess, shock, and magitech. Lures were buffed to have 6 to 12 starting and 50 to 100% of MP cost, which was the same for the magic spell cost and the Esper summon cost, along with a battle MP multiplier of 7 instead of 5, so you'll be learning spells at a much quicker rate. Ultimate was available at 254 magic points, along with the ability to multi-summon Espers and a quality of life Esper mastery icon available to cut down on menu time. Enemies were slightly stronger than normal at level HP and MP scaling of 2.5 times characters plus Espers plus dragons, with the experience and GP at only 2 times that value, maxing out at level 50 instead of the standard 40. Chests were the normal shuffle plus 20% random, and shops were shuffle plus only 10% random, but rods could come for cheap, and Super Balls were out of shops, as well as Illuminas out of the seed entirely. Coliseum rewards were at 120 visible for a slight buff, and the no free characters in Esper's flag was set to on, so high tier items would replace checks without fights. This meant with a Runic Terra, Dance Natural Magic Edgar, and Tools Lore Gao start, we could go to the Sealed Gate Cave for Genji armor, along with an Ice Shield Mega Elixir and a pair of earrings as loot, as well as an Economizer from the Figaro throne, and with lore available immediately, we'd be on the lookout for the White Dragon in this seed. Although we started with Blowfish for early game 1 MP cost and Clean Sweep, access to Grand Train and Whirlwind is ideal. Edgar's early dance abilities had Wump to clear out single targets, and Jump Lock was available at the Welk spot. This opened up a choice between Fixed Ice and Thunder Shield at the weapon shop, which didn't really matter because we could get both with Terra on board, and more importantly, an 8 battle curse shield that would teach Ultima at a 1x rate. Once dispelled, made that early economizer pickup all the more palpable. Thankfully, we had access to stop early with Edgar's natural magic, as we couldn't use some cheap fire rods available at either one of the Thamasa locations, on Poltergeist at Zozo Tower, and we were rewarded with Sketch Shadow, who had a flame shield at his free check, and Throw Setzer waiting to be rescued in the Veld Cave, so if you didn't spot the fire rods any earlier, you definitely noticed them being dumped out at World of Ruin Thamasa now. Setzer's Colin Jinin gave an offering to go with those fixed dice, and outside of Ultima, there weren't really any great spells on most of the Espers after learning Fire and Ice from shields. Rage Celeste was at Daryl's Tomb, and finally in Magitech Factory we got an Esper with Merton that could be used with the elemental shields and a red jacket to replace just yeeting fire rods at the problem beforehand. Although some runners peaked, the White Dragon was nowhere to be found in the easily accessible locations, which certainly altered routes through the seed, given those checks that had dragons were more favorable for the strategy to learn all 24 lores, as well as the controversial Elite River play that resulted in Ragnarok the Esper, which is only good for Cure 3 and some levels from that check. Final party compositions had some using Edgar with Atma Weapon or Fixed Ice, Magic for Terra and Gao after finally getting Fire and Ice 3 for Floating Continent and Mount Zozo Espers, along with Throw from Setzer or Jump Dragonhorn Lock. With a total of nearly 50 entrants, the Returners top 6 times averaged 124.16, while the Empire top 6 times averaged 127.17, thus giving this territory to the Returners, who had 6 of the top 7 times for this area. Next up was the Velt and a Kefka unlock at the standard 6 characters, 9 espers, but the Kefka Tower skip required 4 dragons with a ton of rewards for killing only 3 dragons, including plus 20 to magic power, speed, and strength stats, and learning 50 rages. Heading on through the Serpent Trench rewarded dried meat for the Gao Velt check. However, enemies, bosses, and dragons got plus 10 levels at the start of the seed, with dragons ignoring the scaling options of bosses plus dragons times 3, maxing out at 50. You'd have a 3-character start without equipment or GP and a nerfed stats at 50% to 90% of vanilla, so that 3-dragon reward is enticing, however difficult because they are not scaled. Commands are random unique, but no possess, shock, magitech, X magic, or control. Espers taught less spells at 1 to 4. Chests were better at shuffle plus 35% random, with shops less helpful at shuffle plus 10% random, without any access to rods or super balls, although the Coliseum had 120 visible rewards again. The no free progression flag was also applied to this seed, so we got some high tier items out of our starting characters, with Snow Muffler at Lore Shadows Gal Manor, and Aegis Shield at South Figaro Prisoner, courtesy of Jump Natural Magic Celeste, who were accompanied by Blitz Realm. Runners that went to World of Balance Narsh first were treated to experience eggs for sale in the Relic Shop, which definitely helped fast track towards beating those unscaled dragons, but without starting equipment, it made fights pretty difficult since we didn't really loot any body armor, but shields were available via the Thunder Shield, Force Shield, and the aforementioned reward. Realm could also use the fixed dice that we found early, and that would come in handy for anyone taking a trip up to the floating continent, which the majority of the top times see to avoid, hint hint wink wink, having gotten to fight Ifrit Shiva followed by Magi Master. If you instead went to other spots, you would have gotten characters instead of espers, but also some more difficult bosses, as Steel Lock was after Goddess at Esper Mountain, Slot Cyan showed up at the end of the Magic Factory, as did Doomgaze, and Runic Strago at Mount Zozo after killing one of those unscaled dragons on the way to the KT skip and stat buffs. A vanilla Dirt Dragon was a problem for those that didn't go into Phoenix Cave or Fanatic's Tower from our character checks, as the Inferno spot in Kefka's Tower was Poltergeist that would have been great to skip out on. With those early experience eggs, however, Atma Weapon was a good build, unlocking Bum Rush on Realm was also an option, and Quasar for Shadow kept him in the party throughout the run. The returner time was 125.40, with the Empire at 130.37 for the top 6 average, so again, the returners were able to control this territory, getting 6 of the top 8 times. Lastly was Dragon's Neck, where unlocking Kefka required 1 more character than normal, 7 characters, 9 espers, as well as winning a Coliseum match where there were 255 visible rewards. Kefka Tower skip was at 9 characters and 12 bosses defeated. However, to go with the theme of fighting in the Coliseum, the Auto Berserk status was applied to start, with an option of getting a ribbon at 2 dragon kills and plus 20 strength for killing an additional beast. Runners only started with 2 characters, and there was a buff to the higher end of statistics with 80% to 140%, as well as 5,000 GP. All commands were on the table, random unique, except for Possess. Enemy scaling was similar to that of Thamasa at a slightly higher max level of 50, with 2.5 times characters plus espers plus dragons, but both boss battles and encounters were random instead of shuffled for possible repeats. Magic caught a nerf with 0 to 5 spells per Esper, and a summon MP cost anywhere from 1 to 127, but Espers were only equipable by 6 to 12 random characters. Both chests at random scaled, where order of opening doesn't matter as everyone gets the same item from the same numbered chest, and shops being random tiered with no rods, balls, shields, experience eggs, or illuminas also were painful, but some reprieve came in the form of potential cheap stuff or perhaps wildly expensive stuff, with 25 to 200% of shop prices. That money could be used in the auction house with 1 Esper maximum, but we were really looking for some ribbons or peace rings to counter the Berserk status in the seed, and it was a very slow start for most runners. We got Umaro, fittingly enough, and Jump Lock, which made the choice between Starlet and a Dragon Horn in the Narsh weapon shop even more difficult than normal. Other than the PM Stalkers and the Classroom Monster in a Box, grind fights were especially rough in this one between the level magic, Skybase, and Hitman, as well as the ninjas in easily accessible spots. Other than Aura Lance that Locke couldn't use, and a much needed ribbon for Potion, there wasn't much in the way of rewards for the Coliseum, but we at least got one of our 3 Kefka unlock requirements sorted. Snipers were the weapon of choice for our starting characters, and we were quickly railroaded into Kefka at Narsh with a party of one, and more on that later. Thankfully, the boss is only leader. Or heading to the Phoenix Cave, where Morph Cyan awaited after slogging through boss fights like Air Force, Senor Behemoth, and Atma Weapon with just physical offense. Health Shadow joined at Mount Zozo, and we finally had someone that was decent at magical offense to utilize the Bolt 3 spell that was on one of our first Espers. Capture Sabin was in Cyan's dream, but so was Kefka to add a welcome Peace Ring drop into our inventory after defeating him, and that led to Rage Realm in the Imperial camp, who immediately took his place. Control Blitz Gao was over at the Velt Cave, which dumped you into World of Ruin Thamasa, where Peace Rings were available in the Relic Shop. There was also the option of getting Tool Strago at Kefka at Narsh, followed by Gogo and Evet's Rock, and Runic Mog and Zone Eater for a completely different team. Had you gone to the Floating Continent, you didn't get a character. However, you did get some calmness protection with Golem. Endgame strats in this race varied wildly, even within the top several runners, with some leaning into the Auto Berserk with Atma Weapon and Snipers, bringing Yeti into the final fight. Others use magic spells and put Berserk canceling relics onto those with physical offense for more control, and there were even some multiple imp jumping strats with having both Lock and Go-Go, having access to both jump and the Dragon Horn relics with an additional slot to put in a Peace Ring so you could choose jump every time. Times for this seed were way higher than the others with more Kefka unlock requirements and the nature of the very slow early game, but the Empire with a 145.05 average defeated the returners with a 146.14, having both first and second place times in spite of a bigger gap towards the end of the 6 spots that qualified. Before we go over the map again, there's another fun aspect to this event called skirmishes. They will help determine a tiebreaker at the end of the event and are sync races that are not the same seeds as the async races, but they have the same flag sets. During week 1, there were 6 such races, 3 at Dragon's Neck, 2 at Thamasa, 1 at the Velt, and all of them went the way of the returners. We've uploaded a few of them right here to our YouTube channel, and you can catch them live on our Twitch at FF6 Worlds Collide, so be sure to check it out there for a shameless plug. This puts the current war score at 150 for the returners and 124 for the Empire. Let's see if they can get on the board next week with a skirmish W. So what does our map even look like after 1 week of the event? The returners were able to get 2 territories in the eastern region with Thamasa and Velt, while the Empire grabbed Dragon's Neck on the west side of town. If the returners can manage to hold on to both of those while controlling 1 more on that eastern side, that opens up the Eastern Empire area for the subsequent week, bringing them even closer to victory. Meanwhile, the Empire can possibly open up the returner area for attack in week 3 with 2 more victories in the west and holding on to Dragon's Neck. However, there's only 1 area up for grabs on that side of the map for next week's battle. Since there must be 1 territory from the prior week up for grabs, it's the Velt for week 2, which means that the Empire can use their top 6 average times, while the returners need to average their top 8. So it's a bit easier for the Empire to regain that territory with a smaller slice of the race time sample. If the Empire does in fact win, that area will go back to being contested, and the Empire also avoids being open to attack in its own region. The other 2 areas are Zozo in the west and Doma in the east. These both have some incredibly interesting options, with Zozo having to set the clock quest for Kefka unlock, and if you're unsure how to do that, I made a video on this very topic, link in the description in case you want to know how to do it. Zozo also has 100% random enemy drops and 100% random chests. However, there is a 5% chance that you'll get a random encounter from opening up a chest, so be sure to save often and equip yourself. Normalize and Distort will make bosses that much more difficult, especially tier 3 of Kefka, and the character portrait sprites and names are shuffled, meaning the quote-unquote Terra that you just recruited is actually Sabin, so be sure to figure out who you've got before going to a check that you can't complete. Doma has a lot of vanilla options with commands, Esper spells, bonuses, and MP, but it also has the permadeath flag set, with 3 starting Phoenix Downs being all that you're going to get in the seed, along with 0% escapable encounters. That means you'll be looking for the Phoenix Esper that has both the best spells with Fire 3 and Life 3 and the best summon. Those 2 will be interesting to see what strategies come out of it, but save early, save often in both cases. Will the Empire claw back the Velt, and will the skirmish shutout streak continue for those upstart returners? Find out when we're back for week 2's recap. I've been TheShwantz27. Until next time.